According to the CDC, 20 people are abused by intimate partners every minute. That is at least 10 million cases of domestic abuse each year. Experts say women of affluent backgrounds and education may stay longer in an abusive relationship, and the longer they stay, the more difficult their escape can be. Watch.
He lost his temper and his fist went in the wall right above my head, barely missed me. And I thought, that's it. The next time, that could be me.
You're fighting more, and then you get used to the fighting. And then at some point, maybe I realized, we're not actually fighting, I'm just getting yelled at.
I get 2 or 3 new women calling me every day, and unfortunately, many of them think they're all alone.
Sandy Harvey was married to an executive at a tech firm in Silicon Valley. Sally Davies was a scuba instructor, teaching around the world, and has a master's in marine biology. And Ruth Patrick started a domestic abuse support group after suffering through years of abuse herself. They all thought they knew what abuse looked like, and yet each says she suffered for years at the hands of an abuser.
Our spouses or partners are powerful, they're executives, they're well-known. It's that much more difficult than to leave and be also public with that.
I would never have imagined that I would be in that situation. How can you love somebody so much and be so afraid of them at the same time?
Because of the shame, the fear, the social stigma, many times women have not reached out to the police.
While physical abuse gets more acknowledgement, it is the mental abuse, the loss of identity, that can be more insidious.
The physical abuse, you can go to somebody, you can say, hey, look, I've got a black eye. My husband is a bad man. He shouldn't be doing this to me. But you go to somebody and you say, my husband yells at me all the time. He screams at me and I'm afraid. And people are just like, well, you know.
After years of abuse, Sally says she began to develop severe complex PTSD of the dissociative type, where her identity fragmented into multiple personalities to cope with her stress.
I would start to dissociate and get really fuzzy and not really know what was going on.
But it wasn't until the abuse was directed at her son that she resolved to get out.
My ex was starting to treat my son the same way that he was treating me, and that my son was reacting the same way that I did.
Sally got out, but realized quickly her fight was just beginning. Sandy was in a similar situation.
A lot of anger on his part. They came out towards me and the children, and then it escalated. And as it did, I left. I took the kids with me. I thought I did all the right things.
But she would soon find out her husband was more disturbed than she ever could have imagined. Back with me now, Ruth Patrick, Sandy Harvey, and Sally Davies. Sandy, let me pick it up with you, because that's where our taped piece ended.
Okay.
So your husband was a successful Silicon Valley executive. You were separated. You had left your 5-year-old son with him for a weekend visit.
Yeah.
And then the morning, it was a Sunday morning?
Well, in the end, I'm the one that they found them, but we spoke the night before, and we were discussing divorce. We were selling the house and so on, and it was a calm discussion like you and I are having. But in the morning, they were dead. He shot and killed our 5-year-old son, and then himself. And you know, it's not. Things like this are not supposed to happen. But sometimes we just don't understand what's really going on with somebody, and I think if anything that I really have learned is that it takes time. It just you think like I said, you think you know somebody, but you have to also, even when you leave, and I had left, we were separated for a year, you still have to protect yourself and your kids.
He had emotionally abused you. He had physically abused your children.
Mostly the 2 older ones. And, you know, it was tough on them.
I know that so many women stay in these abusive relationships for the sake of the children.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily the right thing to do. Sometimes it's better to leave and take the kids and change the situation. And it is possible to rebuild. You know, this happened a long time ago. And for a while, I was isolated and I had to learn what to do and how to do it. But eventually, you know, we're getting support and understanding all of this better. And, you know, with Ruth's group, you know, Women SV and counseling and other avenues, then you can really make progress.
Ruth, it's, I know you two are a survivor of domestic abuse, and you formed this amazing group for women who felt too isolated to reach out to anybody. There's almost a stigma because they're supposed to be able to manage it. I know that there's a saying, no one can hear you scream on a 5-acre estate. But they suffer just as much as lower income women do when it comes to physical and emotional abuse. It's probably no accident that her husband took the life of their child and his own life when he had been told it's over, right? And that's a dangerous period.
Yes, you know, the dynamics of power and control are the same. It doesn't matter what economic area you come from, but the more money, the more power, the more influence you have, the easier it is to wield those wield the power and control and coerce. And then you've got this image on the outside that you're this fine, upstanding citizen, a pillar of the community. It's almost like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And
they use finances and their power against the women in clever ways.
It's all about control and getting inside their head. And they can, there's a term called gaslighting where you can manipulate and brainwash someone to the point where they think that they're doubting their memory. Over time, they're doubting their sanity, and they start to doubt reality. And if you couple that with their partner's attempt to prove that or make all kinds of allegations that there's something wrong with them, and they get more isolated over time, it's very common for women to lose their friends, lose their own family members. Their own family members can be turned against them because they're that powerful. Mm-hmm. These are successful, powerful people who are, in many cases, running companies. They're doctors, lawyers, engineers. No one would ever guess they had that dark side. So it's about control in the end.
Sally, you met your husband when you were just 24, I think? 24?
Yeah, 24.
And he was running his own company. And when did you first realize that you had been abused?
I don't think that my eyes were really opened until we started to receive like couples therapy and thinking that it was going to save the marriage and there was something wrong with communication or that's why we're fighting all the time. And then once we started talking to a therapist, Dr. Heitler, she quickly realized that it was something a lot more serious.
It's been characterized by the courts as severe emotional abuse that you suffered. Mm-hmm. So severe that a court wound up giving you full custody of your child, even though he was raised in St. Martin, where your now ex-husband is, which was the first of its kind to remove a child from his country of origin, based purely on emotional abuse. Can you tell us about these disassociative states that you would go into?
I guess my brain was sort of protecting me from myself in a way. And when something bad would happen, it's almost like comforting. You sort of close down, and then you just develop these different states. Like, I don't know, one of them is like a little mouse, so I feel like a little tiny mouse, and that, I don't know, I guess appeased him in some way. And then
would he yell at you? What was the abuse like? It's
this sort of consistent, always present fear, and it can be something, as small as just, like yelling and raging, or it can quickly escalate. But it's also, constantly questioning your memory and your sanity.
The gaslighting.
To the point where you think, what is real? Is this real? I'm not entirely sure.
This is important because little girls are taught about physical abuse. They're not often taught about emotional abuse and that sort of psychological manipulation. Just want to give you a word on couples therapy? Because I know this is an important point, Ruth.
Yes, so many of my ladies who've been through abusive relationships have tried couples counseling. And unfortunately, a lot of therapists, there are some therapists who are very well versed in it, and it's wonderful, but they don't typically get a lot of education in domestic violence in this area. So they go there thinking that it's a communication issue, or if they're only more assertive, or what's my role in it. And unfortunately, the abuser can create an alignment with the therapist, so it becomes the two of them fixing her. And if she dares to say something about how he has hurt her, he'll see that as something that's shaming to him and punish her for it later. So inadvertently, it can end up colluding with the abuser.
I know you say it's dangerous if you stay and it's dangerous if you go.
Safety planning never stops. It never stops because they are punitive and they are vengeful.
I want to tell the audience we did reach out to Sally's ex-husband, Chris Davies. He denies the abuse allegations made against him and complains that the courts, which did believe them, were corrupt and unfair in their ruling for the custody of their son, Kieran. We are very glad you are well, and understanding that it is dangerous in the first couple of years after you leave. We are wishing you all the best and applaud your courage in being here. If you would like to reach out to Ruth regarding her support group, which has done so much good, we're going to post the information for you at today.com/Megyn Today.